Good afternoon. Welcome to the Awakening Entrepreneurial Spirits program on small business. Today we will show you the final program in our 6-part series. The project, Awakening Entrepreneurial Spirit, the Key to Job Creation, emanated from the Pasadena Economic Development Committee in Newfoundland. They realized that an effort had to be made to create an awareness of small business in the Humber Valley Bay of Islands region, to give people a basic understanding of small business, and to help people realize that through local investing, a sound community-based economy can be established. Over 30 individuals from Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island were interviewed and their businesses profiled in a series of videos illustrating the concept of why to as opposed to how to enter the business world. Viewers of the broadcast saw a wide range of programming that included the core video series, live panel discussions, community profiles, school concerts, and live entertainment. Audience participation was encouraged with the provision of a toll-free telephone number and accommodations in the studio for anyone wishing to see the event firsthand. A newspaper editorial that appeared after the broadcast deemed the event successful in breaking the ice to unveiling the economic potential of the Humber Valley Bay of Islands and in revealing yet another innovative economic strategy that involved people as participants for self-help. The 1986 Royal Commission cites the following as obstacles that hamper a small business: poor planning, spending money too soon, bad management, undercapitalization, and other factors. According to many of the entrepreneurs we talked to, other factors include government agencies that were set up to aid the small business person. This video revolves around an interview during which interviewees will respond to various comments made by local business people.
Hello, I'm Bill Party, Development Officer with the town of Pasadena in Newfoundland. Our program today deals with, government programs, illusions and delusions, we'll call it. And as everyone's aware, we've had a multitude of government programs implemented in Atlantic Canada over the last number of years, and obviously these programs have had many benefits, but certainly the people that access these programs successfully probably face some real practicalities about doing that. People that aren't successful in accessing them certainly have different views as well, and as well the people that administer the programs have their own viewpoint as to the value, and the merits of the programs, as well as to the accessibility by the local populace. We have with us today Linda Foote, who is going to co-chair this program with me. Linda is a coordinator of Awakening Entrepreneurial Spirit, a TV project of which these programs are a part of. Next to Linda we have Brian Wenzel, who is a lawyer in Corner Brook, Newfoundland, and as well very much involved in economic development activities throughout the region of Western Newfoundland as director of a corporation called Enterprise West, and as well a business advisor for the Venture Center, Pasadena's Incubator Mall. We have as well a representative from ACOA in Newfoundland, the vice president for ACOA, Mr. Gordon Slade. To start off this program today, we're going to view several clips from interviews we've done with business people in Western Newfoundland, their views on government programs, some of the constraints they faced, and then we'll have a general discussion of those. So we'll look now at the clips that we have from business people in Western Newfoundland.
The average individual is probably dealing with about 15 government branches, and when you're working 40 hours a week, you're not involved with that sort of thing. You're like just for the payroll, you got your Canada pension, you got your unemployment, you got your workman's compensation. So there's 3 groups right there. Then you're passing in your all those deductions, and that's only one little aspect. And then if I'm dealing with say development control all the time, trying to get signs on the highway, to publicize my business, and basically that's all against the law. So you're being blocked in a lot of different ways, and what happens is let's say, for example, I'm trying to put a sign there for my business. Well, I'll give you another example. I'm trying to put a fruit stand out there. I've been 3 years trying to get a fruit stand. So I spent how much energy and time over 3 years trying to get around jurisdictions just to develop that aspect of my business. So you spend all this time that isn't making you money. And that's the same if you're in a transportation business or farming business or any aspect of business. It seems like for every person in government that's there to try to help you, there's at least 10 of them there to block you. And you know, I could give you 1,000 examples of that, and anybody else who's in business for himself could also.
Now, we do have some problems in the future with this deregulation coming in. There's a great deal of talk about the fact that they want everything hauled cheaper, and everybody that's in the trucking industry now agrees that we're doing it as cheap as we can go. Whether the deregulation will drive prices down even further remains to be seen, but if it do, small independent operators like myself won't survive. We'll just have to get out of it, you know, and it'll be left to the big company.
And if you're a woman starting a business, the only thing I can offer them is to just determination as well. You know, there are a couple people out there that will see you through, a couple of bankers. I don't see any of those government funding things working where women are concerned. But, you know, other bankers are willing to give a try.
We just had a series of views on, I guess, some of the restraints placed upon business by the number of government agencies, the time it takes for local business people to deal with them, and the restrictions and regulations, as well as some different views, I guess, from a woman's perspective on dealing with government. Gordon, you're very much involved through ACOA, and you have been involved in other government departments prior to your appointment to ACOA. Certainly there are some, I guess there is some merit to the points being made, but I think there's another reality to administering programs that are introduced into an economy like Atlantic Canada.
Well, that's true. If you look at those clips, I guess the first thing that strikes me is the first person was talking about the number of government departments that a business person has to deal with. And you have both the regulatory side and you have the, what I call the business incentive side. And we have really 3 levels of government that the entrepreneur has to deal with. So the regulatory side, the municipality, the town, the province, which has these various controls and various approvals that a businessman has to go through, well, that's really something, I guess, that we're all concerned about. But the reality is that there is development control. Municipalities do have plans that have to be adhered to. You have all the provincial agencies such as environment and forestry and health and so on. I'm afraid that we're stuck with many of these things, that's part of doing business in Canada, and Atlantic Canada is no different than the rest of the country. So when you look at the regulatory and the incentive side, I guess the incentive side is not as large and as cumbersome as one might be led to believe in talking to some business people.
Brian, you've dealt with government agencies in your economic development, when you wear your economic development hat in Western Newfoundland. What's your reaction to the comments that were made in these clips?
I think, Bill, one of the real problems that the average business person has is understanding the necessity for this both regulatory and business incentive framework. And unfortunately, in West Newfoundland, and I think it's true in Atlantic Canada, we're not dealing with people who are terribly sophisticated in a business society. Atlantic Canada is not very sophisticated when you compare it to perhaps Ontario or British Columbia or in the United States. So right away you have this gap in terms of knowledge and level of acceptance of things that are systematized and whatnot. The other thing is people fail to comprehend the 3 levels that Gordon has mentioned. And of course, within our constitutional framework in this country, each of the 3 levels has a definite set of responsibilities. So the federal level are doing their thing, and the provincial level will do theirs, and so on. And I think that that is something that people just have to get used to, and there's not much we can do about that. On the incentive side, in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a significant impetus to go to fewer agencies, providing better tailored programs to support business. And I think that things have been accomplished to a degree in that area. The Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency was a major effort, and it's still just too embryonic to know if it's going to produce what's desired. There are other agencies, Enterprise Cape Breton, or various provincial agencies, Newfoundland Labrador Development Corporation, and you have the Federal Business Development Bank. There are many agencies in this game still, each with their own mandate, and it still produces a fair bit of confusion. People just don't understand what the roles of the various agencies are.
So I guess what we're saying, and what I'm getting from both your comments, is that while government programs certainly are beneficial to an area like this, they bring their own problems as well, because again, without the sophisticated knowledge of doing business, there's an encumbrance placed upon people in having to deal with the bureaucratic system of government agencies. Is that a fair analysis of one of the problems that we face in Atlantic Canada? Because we know there are lots of programs, there's lots of support there, yet we don't see a big upsurge of small businesses starting. It's happening slowly, but not to the degree you would anticipate with the support that's there.
Well, I think that's right. The basic problem is the underlying society, and it's the Canadian society. We are not very aggressive people, and that's one problem that we have. We are very prone in this country to rely upon governments to provide the nice social framework in which we can all live quite happily. And you saw that in the late 60s and during the 70s with the explosive growth in the civil service and in social welfare programs. Not that some of those programs weren't necessary, I'm not suggesting that, but I think that we've become to rely upon those programs, and we've relied upon the bureaucrats to an undue degree. Now we've reached a stage where the governments can't afford to keep the social programs going, can't afford to keep the bureaucracy expanding. So the underlying social nature is really starting to change in this country, and it's going to force people to look upon themselves, their own self-reliance, and these are traditional traits in Canada, and they're going to have to start to do things themselves. And that's where you come in, Bill, with your project, the Venture Center, and Linda as well. It's an educational process here, and we're doing it on an evolutionary basis because I think that's the only way we can do it. But there are days when you get very frustrated with the whole process and wish there'd be a revolution, but of course that's not in the cards. Those are never very successful. But it's a long-term process. I think we're seeing more and more people who find small business as an acceptable way to forge a living. And that's where the governments can be of some assistance, because they can be a facilitator of some of this. Although you've got to be careful with that. We don't want to create a social welfare system for small enterprise, which is the other danger. And that's the real danger with agencies such as ACOA, because they are subject to the political directives of the politicians, and that's as it should be in this country. We have a democratic system, but we cannot let this become another social welfare net.
Gordon, with ACOA, we get the impression again from the political side that things are going to be done differently, that ACOA is going to be probably a little more proactive and deal with the longer-term issue. And as I guess we're talking about, the longer-term issue seems to be in education towards entrepreneurship. But I guess as importantly, education towards the ability of government to react to the needs of the small business community and people who want to get into business. Are we seeing that with ACOA, and probably some of your views on, from the other side of the fence, the difficulties you have from an operations point of view in dealing with people that basically lack all the knowledge they need probably to access properly the programs that are put in place?
Yes, so I'd like to go back to the first point here for a moment. There's really two things happening. On the regulatory side, things are getting tighter for the most part. I mean, people are more concerned today about the environment and where you construct something. People are concerned about planning and town planning and so on. So the business person, the entrepreneur, is in fact faced with, for the most part, more rigid conditions than perhaps a few years ago. But I believe on the other side, on the assistance, the incentives and so on, that we're making progress, that people, there's less and less of offices that are basically, people would say there's a duplication of effort, and you know, you have 3 or 4 offices that you have to go to look for government assistance. That's changing. And with the COA, I guess we're trying to move in a direction of having an office where a business person can come and not only find out what programs a COA offer, but what other programs are out there that the businessman should be aware of, that the business person could take advantage of. So that's happening, and the big difference between a COA and programs of the last 20 years, for example, is that the programs are designed in Atlantic Canada, and they haven't been in the past. They haven't been, many of them haven't been very sensitive to the circumstances in the region and so on. So that's a fundamental change, that it's the business people, the bureaucracy, and so on, that are, and community leaders that are shaping the policy of this agency. The decision making is in Atlantic Canada, and that's fundamentally different than what we've had in the past. So those 2 factors in themselves should make a significant difference.
Okay,
I'd like to just go back for a minute to the clip we saw there of the lady talking about, I don't see any of those government programs working for women. Now, she didn't explain why she felt that way, but do you think there is any special circumstances surrounding women trying to get access to some programs as opposed to men?
Well, we've been told by some women's organizations that indeed there is a problem, that while the programs are available to women as they are to men, that women haven't had the same experience in dealing with business, that for many women getting into business is a whole new experience. They haven't had any involvement, and consequently there's a lot to learn about business, a lot to learn about how to start a business and so on, and they're starting from a different base than the men are starting from. At least that's one of the points that's been made to us. We've found in ACOA, since we've started, that the applications we've had from women have been very good, and I would say better than the ones we've had from men. They've been well documented, they've done their research, and I guess one of the largest projects that, if not the largest project, that we've announced of the 500 proposals has been for a woman. And the proposal for the ski resort in Clarenville is the one I'm referring to. So we're quite pleased in ACOA with the way women have been coming forward and the kinds of projects they're interested in and so on. And we have a very good dialogue with the various women's groups who are interested in this subject.
I think one of the problems that women have experienced is the fact that traditionally they have done things like run beauty parlors and hat shops and stuff like that. And that type of thing is in a very competitive but a very service-oriented type of environment. Mm-hmm. Whereas today, the thrust is less towards that and more towards, well, the ski resort that Gordon mentions, processing in the fishery, this type of thing, which are non-traditional industries for women to be involved with. But having said all that, I think that women are much more forward in what they're doing these days, and I think they're much better prepared. Just my own practice, usually when women come in for advice, they are very well prepared compared to their male counterparts, and I think that's heartening. I think they're getting the message. Maybe it's because they have to do a little more work, but it certainly makes it easier for people who are analyzing their applications.
So the whole economy of what we're seeing, I think, is evolving in Atlantic Canada, probably much similar to is in the rest of North America. We've got several other clips I want you to look at as well, and other people have made other comments regarding government programs, and let's look at them before we continue our discussion.
So after inquiring around a little bit, I found out that through tourism, there was, you know, it was easy for people to get started, providing they were in the bigger centres, like in towns and cities and that. But they never promoted or encouraged anyone on the outskirts of the outlying areas. So I applied to tourism, and they figured, well, you're wasting your time and your money by starting, because no one's going to go off the beaten track and come up in Cormac and this too far a distance from when people are travelling. They wanted something on the road where they can have easy access to night lodgings and things like that.
But use your local government. I think this is very important. Your provincial government can be very helpful. Federal, in my particular line, no. They're too big. They couldn't care less about the small people. I know that without the province I wouldn't have bought this building. The Feds said if I wanted $500,000 I could have it. If I wanted 70,000 I couldn't. Which, you know, with them saying that small businesses are the backbone of the country, they were not. It's all lip service, as far from my point of view. I mean, if you're in engineering, it may be different. I don't know.
I went through the government because for the simple fact that the interest rates were much lower than the bank. So that's where I borrowed my money from. But in the meantime, the way the government is, you got to spend it, and then they'll give it back to you. So I had to go to the bank to get the money first.
In those clips, I guess there were 3 points that came out of it. Number one, that rural areas sometimes aren't as encouraged as urban areas in government programs. That larger governments probably aren't as friendly towards, again, smaller areas, and there are limits and restrictions on the funding that's available. And thirdly, I guess that one of the constraints that a small business person faces is that oftentimes money has to be spent before it can be reclaimed from government. So again, there's a financial burden that's placed on small business. Gordon, I'll start off with you again and ask for your reaction to those comments, and from your situation now and how you intend to deal with things like this through a COA.
Well, these are fair comments. The first point about access to government programs from rural parts of the province, it's true that people don't have the same access to the offices, because for the most part, in the case of a COA, we have an office in St. John's and Corner Brook and Goose Bay. Well, if you're on southern Labrador coast or in Great Harbour Deep and you have an idea, then you should not be penalized for having to the cost of getting your application in or talking to somebody to get some advice about your project. We're trying to do something about that. We've entered into an agreement with the provincial government to enable some of their people to help market our programs, help us with the assessment of proposals and so on. So that's a real concern we have, and we're trying to deal with that. We're hoping to have some an information network in place here to assist as well. On the other points that were made, the idea that in the case of the federal government we only deal with the big cases, or we're only interested in established businesses or whatever. I guess that is not the case today. I think in earlier programs, the federal government restricted itself to a limited number of sectors and was principally involved with the manufacturing side. We're not so restricted today. We are involved with small projects in rural Newfoundland and Labrador and so on. So that's changing, and for the better. The question of working capital, I guess, which is the point was raised in the third clip, is also a concern we have. There are some people who are starting out who don't have very much in the way of equity, and and have difficulty in getting working capital to get their project off the ground. With our programs, you actually have to have acquired the equipment or whatever before, or at least be partially along the way, because we can give a progress payment now, which wasn't possible before. But we're looking at the whole question of venture capital, the whole question of working capital, and so on, to see if there's a way that that we can do something which is complementary with the banking community and with the other agencies that that government has in place to deal with these questions.
Again, Brian, I guess some of these things again relate back to education, to awareness, and from your perspective, I guess, in the community economic development level, how do you perceive getting around some of these problems and putting in solutions to them?
Well, in the case of the person that's located off the beaten path, I think that there's only two ways to deal with that. First of all, that person has to be very aggressive and has to get into the towns and the cities and ferret out these people and get at them. Secondly, I think the agencies involved in delivery of these services have got to do a fair bit of road work as well. And some of the agencies, in fact, do a fair bit of road work. Some of the conventional term lending arms of government, if I can use that term without being too specific, in fact, go on road visits and that type of thing. With respect to the only being interested in the big enterprise, that, of course, is a very traditional Atlantic Canadian problem, and it happened in all four Atlantic provinces, where if you came in from Toronto or New York or someplace in the middle of Europe, and you had a grandiose plan, you could get huge sums of money, and the local entrepreneur couldn't get anything. I think those days are gone. I think ECO is a good example of the end of that type of thing. That type of thing I think we're working on, and I think we're getting somewhere. The working capital thing is a different problem altogether, and you know, it's become quite evident that you don't get long-term stability from enterprises that don't have some equity in them, and particularly equity of those who are trying to make those enterprises run. And maybe it's the old adage, you need money to make money sort of thing. You can get venture capital. In Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, you know, very elaborate venture capital programs have been developed, but you have to be sophisticated to get that venture capital. And you need accountants, and you need lawyers, and you need business advisors to put together the packages to make that happen. That doesn't really help the person in Great Harbour Deep or the south coast of Labrador really overcome their equity problems. And I think that we're going to have to design some packages that are malleable enough that we can get into those areas and give those people an opportunity to expand their equity base and get on with it.
In one of the other programs, we dealt with business investing, and we were told that there's something like $300 million per year that's invested out of Newfoundland, in particular in other areas of Canada. With all the, I guess, modern communications technology, it seems that maybe that's one area we should be addressing, in that we do have constraints living in rural areas, as Gordon said, in places that are isolated. They don't have the same accessibility to information and government programs. But certainly with modern technology and television today, when we're going all through Atlantic Canada, there must be mechanisms that can be put in place so that people in rural areas aren't at such a disadvantage as probably they're perceived to be. And again, from the other perspective, with education, a lot of this isolation is perception rather than reality. And I think we have to try and break that down. And I know, Gordon, you mentioned the fact that you are looking at some kind of a network to tie all this together. You know, again, we should look at that. And I think probably if you have any comments regarding how we bring rural Atlantic Canada into the mainstream of activity, certainly would be very beneficial to our viewing audience today, because again, we're reaching people who probably have ideas, looking at getting into entrepreneurship, then where do I go from here? Where do I start?
Well, it goes back to, I guess, some of the recommendations of the Royal Commission on Employment and Unemployment, where certainly Dr. House and his commissioners saw the need for this kind of network. That I guess the hypothesis there is that Newfoundland, rural Newfoundland, can be linked from a communication standpoint with the rest of the world, and there's no reason to have isolation in the sense of information, that the person in southern Labrador or on the Great Northern Peninsula should be able to access information on the same basis as any other part of the province. And we think that will be a reality. We've funded one project and are looking at another project that will move that further along. So we're making some progress on that score, in my mind.
Go ahead, Brian.
Bill, I think that one thing that's got to be noted here, that it's going to have to be a wide range of delivery vehicles. Not everybody has a computer, and I know that some people just love to computerize all this. That's fine if you're dealing with a sophisticated person in rural Atlantic Canada. It's a combination of effort through the school system, the local municipalities, development associations where they exist, and that's different from province to province, plus the television media, regional broadcasting. It's sort of a menu type thing. You can switch the channel if you want to, or you can go on and watch something else. So I think it's a wide range of vehicles that have got to be used here. Good old printed media is not a bad one too, for some things, but not for everything.
There's a tendency to, I think, to think that we've created a very dependent society in Atlantic Canada. Again, I think the reality of this poses some of the constraints, and we're talking today about illusions and delusions about government programs. There are all kinds of programs available, as we've talked about, and there are problems in accessing these. From a perspective of this dependency syndrome, how does that impact on people? I mean, they become very dependent on various government programs and accessing them. How is this a deterrent to them in accessing the incentive programs that we talked about earlier? Or is it?
No, it's a real deterrent. We have the famous 1042 plan. 10 weeks of unemployment insurance brings you 42 weeks of income. Now, the unemployment insurance system was designed to be a maintenance type system for people who fell upon hard times, as any insurance plan should be. Well, of course, now it's an income support program, which is a continuing thing, and some people would suggest it's the third largest source of income in Newfoundland, which is absolutely horrific when you think about it. We've got to build in a series of incentives to encourage people to be self-reliant, energetic, and competitive. And that's a whole different attitude than we have preached for the last 30 years in this country.
So again, it gets back to education, Gordon. From your perspective in dealing with various applications and applicants and through your people in your department, does this show through? The lack of sophistication Brian talks about, the lack of homework prepared, and the lack of business planning. Is that evident in the applications that come forward, and probably relates to some of the problems people face and some of their impressions that we saw in these video clips, that maybe we can throw it right back at the people involved and say, look, maybe they didn't do their homework properly, and if they had, their flow through the system might be easier.
Well, I think that is the case. I mentioned earlier the applications we've received from women, and I think that our application is not a sophisticated application. It's a simplified version, and I don't think it's difficult to complete that application. But we find all the time people sending in applications where there's only partial information, half completed, and so on. And that tends to slow down the process, but there's a view out there that I'll make the application, but somebody else has to do all the homework. And I guess we say, if you have an idea, we'll help you develop your idea and so on. But there has to be a good deal of effort on behalf of the entrepreneur and the applicant and so on to do their homework before they come to us, and we'll help them after they come to us. But we found with the what I would say the new breed of entrepreneur, who is not dependent on the Social Security system to the same degree, have indeed taken a different approach in completing their application and in dealing with the COA officers.
Yep. Again, you know, it goes back, and I guess part of the reason for these programs has been from an education perspective to make people aware of all the different components that make up business planning, the programs that are there, and to, I guess, throw it back at them and say, look, you know, there is a responsibility. If you want to go into business, you have an idea, you still have to invest not only your money but your time in developing plans, because again, while programs are there to assist, they're not there to be all-encompassing, and you must do something as well. And I think, Gordon, we can suggest that in a lot of cases where it's been made easy for people to go into business, we see probably a higher level of failure rate in businesses like that, because again, the proper homework, the proper working capital, all those things aren't in place. So again, some of the reasons there are restrictions on government programs is to ensure that people do their homework, put all the factors in place they need, and have adequate financing in order to carry through the business when they get up and running.
I think too, Bill, if I could just add a comment there, that people have to realize that if they indeed do a lot of the homework themselves, like do their own market study, do their own financial digging for money or whatever, in the long run it's going to help themselves, because they're going to know better what their business is going to be about. It's going to help them down the road probably make their business more successful, as opposed to if somebody else did the work for them. They're not as familiar with it. They're not entrenched in it.
That's true. And in fact, we have programs now that can help people with their feasibility of their project and with the marketing and so on. So there are programs within a COA that can help you do that, and that's a new feature that didn't exist before. But I wasn't referring to that as much as the sort of basic idea that you have in mind, the general parameters of that we look to the entrepreneur to really have that sorted out in their mind.
I think the important thing to realize is that the lender, and it doesn't matter whether the lender is the government or a private agency, the lender is not going into business. The lender is facilitating the going into business of an entrepreneur. And the entrepreneur is responsible for doing the planning and doing the execution of his plan. And hopefully he or she will be successful. But you shouldn't be relying upon that lender to be the determining factor of success or lack of success.
Well, one of the points we want to make today, I think in Atlantic Canada we are very, very rural in nature. We've talked about accessibility of programs, accessibility of information. We oftentimes think, I think of a rural nature as being a detriment to doing business. And I think one of the things that, from my perspective, I'd like to see is more education towards the strengths that we've got in rural Canada and rural Atlantic Canada, because I do believe that we've got real value, not only in natural resources, but in human resources in rural areas. One of the purposes of the programs such as this that we're doing is to make people more aware of these strengths, that we really can do it in Atlantic Canada. And Brian, from your perspective, you've been involved in Western Newfoundland in several conferences and economic development matters on a regional basis. And I think you can verify that there are a lot of strengths out there. There's a lot of human resources.
Well, I think that's right, Bill. Traditionally, it's been much more difficult to survive in the rural areas of Atlantic Canada than it has in the urban areas, and certainly in the heavily industrialized areas of central Canada. But we've done strange things in Atlantic Canada. We have the self-reliance, and yet we've managed to damage that self-reliance quite significantly by making it all too easy to fall into the social services network. There's no incentive to get out of that, and it's just too easy to stay home and put the feet up and watch the TV. Now, that's a perception. that many, many people have. And unfortunately, that perception is getting more and more credibility as time goes on. So we've been fighting that wave, and I think we've had some success in Western Newfoundland in fighting that attitude. And that was really the objective in all these conferences that we ran and seminars and things like that. And I was encouraged by the interest from rural areas in these things. There are people out there that are not prepared to sit back and accept the status quo. They want to get on with doing something. So I think the spirit is still there. What we've got to do is make sure the spirit grows. And we've got to keep going with that. And a lot of it, as we've said in the program, is education.
Gordon, are we going to see more proactive approaches to this kind of education, not from an academic perspective, but from a program perspective coming from ACOA? Is this one of the thrusts that we're likely to see from an agency such as yours?
Yes, ACOA is indeed concerned with the long term. We've been preoccupied for the past year with the small and medium-sized business aspect of our mandate, but certainly the most important part of our mandate is dealing with the long term, working with the institutions, working with the provincial government, working with local communities and so on, to do something that 10, 15, 20 years from now you can see that we've made an impact, that entrepreneurship and the value of starting an enterprise and the wealth it creates and the jobs it creates and the self-esteem and so on that comes from all of that. I think we'll make progress, and I'm very encouraged even in the first year in how people are coming forward and so on. But we've only scratched the surface in terms of this longer-term approach and getting our act together with all the parties involved.
In our programs, and this is the sixth of a series that we've put together to introduce, I guess, the broader population in Atlantic Canada to entrepreneurship, the attributes of getting involved and looking at it as a career option to whatever you're doing now, whether you're in school or working for someone else. My philosophy has been that if you develop people, then job creation will be a net benefit of this development process. In closing, I'd like to pass it over to Brian first and then Gordon just for some closing remarks. We've got an audience out there that we're putting forth the view that in Atlantic Canada, yes, there are opportunities, and yes, we can do it, and we can do it in rural areas. Any pearls of wisdom you'd like to pass on to people out there? Because I really get excited about our situation right now in Atlantic Canada. We're on the verge, I think, of one of the most progressive development eras we're going to see in a long, long time. There's lots of opportunities for local people and small business people, and I guess we've got to do it ourselves. We can't really be dependent on anyone, including government, to do it for us. Certainly they can assist and facilitate, as you said, Brian, but to be the agents of change and the agents to do it is going to take entrepreneurs, and it's going to take entrepreneurs in Atlantic Canada. So Brian, you first, if you have something you'd like to pass on.
Well, I think, Bill, it's just really a summation of what we've been saying. It is an educational process which has got to be designed to change the attitude of the last 30 years, and it has to also be designed to increase the level of sophistication and knowledge of those who have the will and have the energy to try the entrepreneurship option and make a success of it. And I think that's where it starts from, and then everything flows from that. And that's the long-term project that Gordon was speaking about. In the short run, the facilitation of new projects has got to continue, and that will continue in the long run too. But hopefully over the long run, the thrust will change, and you'll be dealing with people who are more competitive and really more capable of going forth.
Gordon?
Well, I go back to the Royal Commission report again, which really accuses government of not creating the environment and the opportunity for would-be entrepreneurs and others to get out there and develop the potential of rural Newfoundland. So I think we're moving in the direction of providing the opportunity for people to to invest, to come up with new ideas. And I guess I would say to the people in Atlantic Canada that they should move ahead and come forward. I mean, I find there's a lot of people today who say, oh, I've tried this before, or I've gone to government before, and it's too sophisticated, it's too awesome, it's too difficult. I think it's changing, and I guess if there's a message I have is try us and see what happens.
I think, Gordon, this is a very important message. The whole thrust of these programs has been towards education, as I said, towards awakening people to the opportunities and the support that's out there. And there's lots of support. Again, there's many illusions about the availability of funds and many delusions from people who have tried and probably didn't try it from the proper perspective. And probably what they need to do, as you said, is go back and go at it again. Linda, we've had 6 programs. We've dealt with many aspects of business development, entrepreneurship. I think that in our effort in the last year and a half, we've tried to create probably an environment in our own area and certainly pass it on to other areas in Atlantic Canada. What about yourself? What comment would you like to pass on as we leave these programs?
I think the thrust of a lot of the programs that we've had in this series is talking about getting people to look at entrepreneurship as an option for themselves. But another big point is that everybody is not cut out to be an entrepreneur, to be a small business person. Maybe 10% will. The other 90%, what they have to do is support the 10%, and that's the other big thrust of it. You've got to have local support for a small business that's starting. And if that support is not there, it's going to make it much harder for the person that's going into business.
Again, in the other programs we've seen and we've talked about investing in local areas, keeping the money and revolving, and as a result, creating wealth and a side benefit, again, of creating wealth as jobs. And again, I want to thank both Brian and Gordon for coming along today and sharing their views with us. We've given you an opportunity today to look at, I guess, another viewpoint of government programs and projects that are out there and opportunities that are available to you. We've given you over the last 6 weeks an opportunity to not learn how to do it, but certainly, hopefully, we've given you some insight into what it's all about, what business is all about, what investing is all about, what government agencies are all about, and as a result, maybe the 10% that Linda talks about will take up the challenge and help us build Atlantic Canada into probably a more vibrant area than we've ever seen, because as I said, I'm quite excited, and I think the people with me today are quite excited about where we're going in Atlantic Canada. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for joining us over the last 6 weeks.
Numerous government-sponsored agencies have been put in place to assist new and existing entrepreneurs with various aspects of their business. However, we must realize that most of the work that contributes to the success of a business must come from ourselves. We cannot depend on our local government for everything. Everyone is not destined to open a business. However, you can support those that are. Government must also realize that its support and encouragement can help small business. Like you, they must understand what is involved in setting up a business and be ready to meet the business person halfway. One way to do this would be to examine the route a business person has to travel to set up his business and try to minimize the red tape involved. Over the last 6 weeks, you have seen programs dealing with different aspects of small business. These programs were designed to awaken the entrepreneurial spirit that may be lying dormant inside you. Everyone is not cut out to be a business person, but you will never know for sure until you examine the possibilities around you and your own potential. Think about small business the next time you fill out a job application or consider changing your career.